If you have a 2001 to 2007 Mini Cooper R50, R52, or R53 with a Harman Kardon system and you want to upgrade to a radio with Android Auto or Apple Carplay, this is the video for you. I'll be installing a drawing head unit while retaining the factory sound system using an HK enabler harness with a steering wheel control module. So the first step as part of a radio upgrade is to remove the radio. Now this radio is actually held in with 4 screws in here, but to get to them we need to remove these trim panels. Now these are held in with 4 screws, one right here, one there, which is accessible when you open the glove box, and same thing on the other side, right here and right here. Now for this top one we'll have to pull this down, and then we will have to work on the center console, which is held in by 4 screws, which are here and here, and then underneath this mirror adjustment panel. So we'll have to pry this off and get to those 2. That will allow us to shift the center console, and once these are unscrewed, they'll be able to slide out. Let's get to it. And there's one right here. This one's actually missing, so I'll have to get a replacement. This panel right here is held on with a clip here, and at least one clip on the other side. So we're going to pull down carefully. Whew. I want to point out that this panel can just hinge down when the clips come out, but in my case it popped out completely. You can leave it hooked on its hinge instead of removing it. As you can see right here, the clip. The other one right there. And at the bottom we have little hook type that go to here, here, and here. I'm gonna put this panel away in the back, out of the way. And if you're wondering what this is here, it's actually a wire for this Bluetooth adapter that was run into the aux port here. You can now access the screw right here. If you can't fit the screwdriver in here, use a ratchet. So on this car there were 2 sizes. This was T40, and then on the other side we had a little T25. It might depend on your car. As we get ready to remove this panel, we have to pry this off. There's a couple of clips, or a bunch of clips, so it's in pretty tight. So we want to use a trim tool so we don't scratch anything. There we go. So you can actually see these little metal clips. One of them fell out, but we'll be able to reattach it. So as you can see, it would just slide in there. So like, it'll fit back in like that. This metal plate is in the bottom, and there we go. Now we'll just have to decide if we unplug this or not. But the 2 other mounting screws are there, so 2 in the cup holders, 2 under the switch. And these are Phillips. Now this was that to shift up? No. Oh, okay. Yeah, if you open this side, it'll slide out of the way. That should be enough. Now if you want to remove these completely, I think they slide out through the bottom because they're flared at the bottom, but we just need to access these 4 bolts or screws. So with the glove box open, you can pull these down a little bit and they'll be able to move out of the way. Yeah, that's T20. And just grab this and I'll slide forward. And what I forgot to do is check if there was a CD in here. So with the head unit unscrewed, we can pull it out, pull it forward. Let's see, okay, you might have to move it. And we have a couple connectors back here. So we've got what looks like an antenna connection over here, a main harness over to this side. So this connector group right here is a cam lock. There's a little tab right there we can push down on. And that pulled the whole thing out, the whole assembly. Go right there. And that pulls it out of the radio. And then the harness is held on right there. So we're gonna undo this. Pop that back in. And all we have is our antenna right here. Okay, there's a little clip on the outside edge here. There we go. So for the antenna, you can push right here to release it and pull straight out. The main harness will snap in like this, and you can squeeze this to pull it up. Right there. Now, let's go take a look at what harnesses this is all going to connect to. Now, because this car has a Harman Kardon system, we're using a special adapter harness to connect to all this. Now for the radio we're putting in, we have a couple components. We've got the radio itself. We've got the singled in frame for the radio. We've got the display portion of the radio, which you'll see soon. We have the harness, which is an ISO style connector, which is very good, especially for what we're doing. Got 2 USB extensions, because there are 2 USB ports right here, plus an extra one right there. A GPS antenna and 2 4G antennas. So those antennas are if you want to use built-in SIM card for the SIM tray that is right here. And that's if you want to get a data plan for the head unit, but we will be using Android Auto or Apple Carplay. Now you have all this, but like I mentioned, this car has a Harman Kardon system. So I have this right here, which is the adapter harness that'll go between the car and a radio. Now, this is what we saw on the car side. This is some sort of decoder box for the Harman Kardon system. This is a toggle for the Harman Kardon system, which we'll go into later on, but allows you to switch through different modes for the amp. But by default, it'll just be centered. The balance and fader will be set in the center. We've got our ISO plugs, which is great because that's what this wants. And then we have a steering wheel decoder. You see BMW because this is a BMW Mini. So this kit also came with pins and ISO plugs. So this is for if the radio you plan on putting in doesn't come with one of these, it just comes with bare wire. You can pin it to the wire, so it's just plug and play, and it's easy to unplug if you have to remove the unit. So for the steering wheel controls, we have this little 3.5 millimeter adapter that goes to the decoder box for the steering wheel controls. I also got this female 3.5 millimeter connector, so this harness can stay attached to the car, and this can attach to the radio. So that means that if I need to disconnect the radio, I can unplug it, unplug those connectors, unplug this, and then this can stay in the car. Now, depending on the radio you have, these wires will have to go to different places and you'll have to connect different things. Now I'm gonna adjust some of these connections so that they work for the self-learning system that has these 2 wires. So these 2 are gonna end up wired to 2 of these wires, and then those 2 wires will go in on the end here, and I'll go into that in a little more detail. That is everything we're gonna need to make this radio work with the Harman Kardon system. Now you could use your favorite method to crimp these. This has worked well for me in the past. Now this is quite thin here, so we'll see how we do here. I think I'm gonna peel it back further, fold it back, and then crimp it on this side. Now if this doesn't work out, I will probably end up pulling this back, soldering them. You can solder them together and do that, but this should be okay. Here we go. All right, so our red and white wires are the ones we want here. Now, depending on the head unit you have, you'll have a different pinout. And normally you would be able to order, when you order your harness, your HK enabler, you'd be able to get the one pre-wired. So I recommend you just do that. But in my case, I'm just redoing this one. So right here, there's a little catch there, and this little piece of plastic can get raised up a tiny bit to let it slide out. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to switch this white one to the bottom based on the drawing, the diagrams I have for compatibility. Nope, I got both out. Okay. So right here, red one's going back in its spot, and then the white one gets flipped around, plugged in there. Now you can use a thin tool to help push it in. It's locked in. That will go in here. Yeah, for self-learning units, that is how we go. Yep. Looks right. Yep. Now if I need to, I can undo that or redo it as needed, but the head unit we're putting in should have self-learning. So this will now connect to this right here, which is our two key 1 and key 2 cables or wires. And it's just easy to plug in, easy to disconnect. So that's our two harnesses prepped. Everything else, goes through, we've got our audio outputs are the gray, green, white, and purple colors. This stuff is our power, 12 volt ground. 12 volt ground and red is usually switched power, that kind of stuff. On this harness it's the same thing. And yeah, cool. We've got our main cable here and our antenna cable here. We'll have to see if we have an adapter for that or not. We'd need an adapter like that, but we'll see. Maybe we can add that later. What we want to connect here is this. So it'll only fit in one way. I'm gonna pop this. Oh, this has to be open here. And then we can line it up. It is going to be like this. So we'll let that come up. And then there we go. We'll need to route this somewhere accessible. But for now, we're gonna tuck all this further in. There's a lot of stuff, huh? Let's see, we're gonna have to put that stuff further back. Fortunately, there's plenty of room, especially since our unit is a little shorter, maybe. We'll probably get back in here and wrap things in fabric tape so it doesn't jangle around, but while we're testing, we're gonna leave it just pushed in. So we have that, I'm gonna run this back here just for now, so we can reach it to test it. And now we can connect our ISO connectors to the new radio harness, which actually comes with the foam on this, which is nice. So we're gonna connect these. These can only fit one way. You'll see one of them has a tab, a retainer tab on the center, and the other one has it offset. So center and offset, they'll only fit in one way. Snaps in. That snaps in. Now we've got our steering wheel control thing we made. That also goes in. It's a lot of stuff, huh? Now you can run a backup camera. We're in a Mini, it's a very short car, but this is where you plug it in. So we can get our radio. Now it's gonna plug in there. Now this is the tin cage. It's gonna go in here. We will have to, you see it's loose. We're gonna have to figure out which one of these tabs to push in. It's probably gonna end up being one of these. That way it'll lock it in. You can see here, that's probably what we want one of these to hook into so that it locks it in and the radio doesn't just slide in and out. But since we're testing, let's take our unit here, and then we just have to, right here, plug in the Main harness. We can add in, antennas and stuff later. It's plugged in. Okay, so I'm having trouble because this little harness back here keeps getting caught on stuff. Position the screen. I'm gonna go get that right now. Okay, so you can see here, this is a pretty big size screen. Nice metal bezel, but we have a lot of options for where to put these clips. Where they are right now kind of centers them, but it covers a lot of the HVAC controls. So what we're gonna do is later on we're gonna move these down so this can come up and probably be around here. We would be able to reach all the controls. Let's pop this on. That snaps on. It only fits on one way, so you can't mount it upside down. And that is the current position. So it'll look like that. Let's get this powered on and see what we got, what we're working with. Oh, we are on, okay. Okay, wow, that's a pretty nice screen, huh? At this point, I did a little bit of testing and realized there were a few issues. I wasn't getting any sound, the steering wheel controls didn't work right, and my battery voltage was a little too low. Alright, so after plugging in the radio and testing it a little bit, I had to do a little bit of troubleshooting. For one, the radio was working, but I wasn't getting sound, and it turns out that if we look here on the HK enabler harness, right here, there's a blue wire that goes to the car. Now on this side, it was actually missing. And what this is actually a signal wire for the amplifier, in our case, the Harman Kardon amp. And without a signal from the radio to tell it to turn on, it won't turn on and you don't get audio. So what I ended up doing is I found on the radio harness the amp cont, which is amp continuity. So it's actually the signal wire for an amplifier. That's actually marked in the manual for the radio. And so what I ended up having to do was wire that in to the harness. Now, fortunately, I had these ISO connectors, which are useful to make your own harness if your radio doesn't come with these connectors. And the way these work is you break it off this rail. What happens is these taller tabs get crimped around the insulation and the wider ones right here around the wire. So once you do that, when you break it off, you crimp it with the crimp tool, and then you can just slide it in right in that spot. So on your radio, it might be a different color. On mine, it's orange, but just look for this tag and it'll slide in. You just have to slot it in so it matches up with this blue wire here. I put that back in. Now another challenge I ran into was with the steering wheel controls. The wiring I did is supposed to work for radios that have self-learning, and it did read signals, but the way it was set up is each button press was like a latching switch. So it would just change the values that were being read by the radio, and it didn't work. So I ended up trying a couple different options that were listed in the manual for the decoder, and I ended up with the Sony type, which is those loops, and that's what worked for my radio. So that's 2 loops and 3 wires. I actually ended up wiring this. I added the ground as well. So I T-tapped into the ground cable. I'll leave a link to the PDF that has the different options. Now when you order this harness with the steering wheel controls, you'll be able to choose an adapter cable like this one based on the radio you get. So if you have a Pioneer, you can get the one that matches for that. JVC, Sony, Alpine, a bunch of them. All right, let's get this buttoned up. I'm gonna tape around some of this to make it a little sturdier. Doing this here because they're really thin wires. Putting fabric tape around this so that if it bounces around, it won't be plastic banging into things. Helps reduce rattles. Fabric tape I use is Tessa tape. Works well. All right, I think we're ready to put this back in the car. Now you have a couple things to do before we put the radio in. I'm going to feed the microphone through. That's going to come out back here on this side. Undo this. We'll run that up the A pillar later. We're going to reach back here. There we go. Pull that through. And I'll leave this on the dash for now. So you can see back here, you can reach through. So anything you have to run out, like a backup camera or antennas or whatever, those are going to come out there. I am going to put the GPS antenna through there as well, or leave it in here. Some people will say mount it on the windshield. I've had okay results in other cars leaving it in the dash. Ultimately, I'm 99% of the time going to be using Android Auto or Apple Carplay, so this is just a fallback. I'll probably wrap a bit of fabric tape around it. Go back here. Actually, this is also a time when you would put in an antenna adapter. I'll have to order one and get back in here later. But that's when you would put it in. We want to pull this through, and we want to connect our main harness in. Snap that in. Now, since this is not attached directly to the radio, I'm going to wrap this in fabric tape as well, just so that it doesn't clatter with vibrations. And sometimes, you know, you have to come back in and reposition stuff if it's really rattly, but with the fabric tape, we can kind of get a head start on avoiding that. This wire, I'm actually going to tape up behind this panel because I'm not really going to be using it. It's really, if you really want to change a couple settings like regular, spatial, driver focused, regular, that kind of stuff, it's all explained in the documentation for this. It's not something I'm going to be using much, so I'm going to tape it under this panel. So if I need to, pop this down, reach in, adjust it, but something to keep in mind. So I'm going to start feeding this in. I mentioned before this unit has USB inputs. Those can be useful for wired Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but it also turns out that this unit has wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so I'm not going to need to plug anything in. So I'm just going to leave it like this. If you need to use wired, or you want the radio to charge your phone instead of the 12-volt adapter, you would plug them in now and run them where you need them and have them ready to go. Our screen cable has 2 catches. So this is actually the app that you use to configure your steering wheel controls. Let me just double check that it works. Close that out. We got our, oh come on, it was working last time. Oh, well that would explain it. This came out of there. Now the issue I ran into earlier was that this crimp wasn't tight enough, so it came undone and stopped working. But everything's good to go now. So I'm gonna wrap this in fabric tape so it doesn't get clinky. And then we'll put everything in. I'm probably gonna have to unplug the radio harness so I can put the DIN cage in. All right, let's unplug this for just a moment. We'll do a final check before we mount the cage. We gotta run this back here, that back here. We're gonna put this behind there. Microphone, GPS, that. You can see here, there's a bunch of little tabs that we can push in. So what we're gonna end up doing is pushing these in so that it grabs. And there's like a little lip up here, and the rest we'll have to just press into the plastic. So I'm gonna get a screwdriver, push these in. It's a little loose on the bottom. Maybe I can do a little more. So I pushed in some of the top ones, I pushed in the ones back here. Side to side isn't so much the issue, it's the bottom, wedging the bottom in there. It's giving me some trouble.
To help keep the cage in place, I ended up using a couple pieces of cardstock as wedges for the bottom side.
Now there's 2 depths at which this can mount. And I put it in upside down. Smart.
The radio really snaps into the cage, and you'll want to have radio removal tools on hand to remove it. I recommend getting comfortable removing the radio from the cage before you put either of them in the car so that you know what to expect. I found that reaching behind the radio near the steering wheel allowed me to push it from the back to help release it.
Alright, try again. Alright, let's test it. Pop that on. We'll have to adjust the height of this later. That's snapped in. That's resting there. Just want to make sure the steering wheel controls work, sound works. Most of the steering wheel controls are working. I'm going to double check. Yes, we are good. All right. Right here you can see there's 2 little steps, and the latch in the cage can catch it on either one. So just keep that in mind. We're going to do the first one. That is locked in there. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that first step. It feels secure. And what I'm going to do here is move these. Let's see. So as we're here, we want to be up a little more. Unless we can move it down too. You can even offset it, so if you need it to shift over, but we're keeping it centered in this case. This actually slides in from the side, so you can, well, if you don't drop it, you can slide it on. All right. Pop this back in, snap it in. You feed that ribbon cable in. Maybe I should have attached this before I pushed it in. Feels pretty good. All right, now right here, for my line of sight, these are a little hidden, but you know, if this is set it to auto, you're not really gonna touch that. But yeah, that's the view. All right, next we can, I have my cable through, I have my microphone through, so we can put these side panels back in. That's the sides in. Let's put the Phillips screws in. You got those 2 in. I should put these 2 back in. And we'll be good to go. That's back in. That's in. This right here I'm gonna secure out of the way, so if we need to reach it, we can just grab it. Pull the panel down and grab it. Actually, maybe we can even just have it back here so that we can reach up under here. That would probably be ideal. So to run the microphone, I'm gonna actually pull it through here. I'll run it up along here and over into the trim here. And up, A-pillar trim, but I can snap this back in. All you have to do is use the trim tool, pop this out. Okay, so I'm gonna be working on this here. I should probably place this first. Go up here or over there. We'll run that up here behind this, and then we can either leave it here or run it over right here, which is probably gonna be there. Let's position our microphone up here. I'm just gonna use the sticky side here. Now we wanna tuck this behind the headliner. And we wanna tuck it in here, oops. So up here you want to gently push it in with the trim tool. And we're going to work along, using both hands. And once you get up here, you're going to leave a little loop in there. And then start bringing it down in this trim. Once you get down here, we can actually reach under here, find our cable, pull it back through, finish tucking it in here. Push it in there. Like that. We'll loop this up. Maybe tuck it out of the way, and we can put our panel back in. There we go. There we go. We're all buttoned up. And this is the completed install. A little microphone. That's going to come off because it was our old phone holder. We've got our new radio and everything's tucked away. So this is another one of those impossible radio installs that some shops will tell you can't be done without replacing your entire system, including speakers. You hear this a lot on European luxury cars, especially with these premium sound systems. Some audio installers will tell you that the only way to use an aftermarket radio is to bypass the factory amp and run directly to the speakers, which also need to be replaced because they're not compatible with your radio's amp or an aftermarket one. They'll charge you a fortune and hack up a perfectly good system, when in reality there's a solution that's plug and play like we just did here. The best part is, with a modern radio, this Harman Kardon system sounds better than it ever has. If this video helped you out or you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. If you like seeing impossible radio upgrades where we give older cars modern features, or you enjoy seeing old cheap European luxury cars being rebuilt, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.